these would be the notes that if you missed class that you would been filling in class while I went through them. So I want to just make this available to you. This section was 1.6, and here is where we are going to evaluate expressions. Evaluate is a term that means just plug in the numbers and get an answer for it. And so one of the things that you use this on is formulas. And you guys that are in P-TECH are going to find out that this is something you use quite a bit. So you're going to replace each variable by the assigned value that they give you. They're going to give you a mathematical expression, just like what we did in 1.5, but now they're going to tell you what numbers to plug in for the variable. So basically you're going to plug in a number, turn a crank, and get an answer. It's kind of like washing clothes. So here, put your parentheses around the value that you're plugging in. I always make sure that, especially when you're plugging in a negative number, put it in parentheses. Generally, as a rule, I just said whatever number you're plugging in, put it in parentheses. So then you're going to just use the basic arithmetic with the correct order of operations. Now, order of operations, most people remember this as a little word called PEMDAS. And that means parentheses expressions, exponents, multiplication and divide, or add and subtract. Now, multiplication and division and add and subtract are on the same level of priority, and that just means that if you have multiply and divide on the same expression, you do it left to right. So whichever comes first, you're going to do it that way. So let's go through and look and see. Here's the first one I kind of already filled in for you. It says for the x's, you're going to fill in -2. For the y's, you're going to fill in a 3. So you go 5, put your parentheses, stick in the -2, minus the 2, and then you're going to put your parentheses and stick in the 3. So then you just go back and do the numbers. So here I have -10, so -10, 5 times -2, and now this is -2 because it has a minus, which is the same as a negative sign, times 3, so -6. Then just add. I have two negative numbers. I'm losing $10, then I lose 6 more, so that just means I've lost $16. Okay, go over to number 2, and it says in every place you see an A, you're going to place it with a -2. So I'm going to put 6, and I'm going to put a -2 in parentheses. Then I'm going to go over here, and it says replace the B with a -3. Then I'm going to go to the next expression that's got some parentheses. In place of the B, I'm going to put a -3, and then I have +5. Now, since PEMDAS says use parentheses first, then you could go and do parentheses first. It's not going to matter here because they're going to both end up being about the same balance. Here I can multiply all 3 of these, so I can multiply in any order. I would do the 2 negatives first, so -2 times -3 would be +6 times another 6 would give me 36. And now over here in the parentheses, I have a -3 and a +5, which would be 2. So now I put -2. So 36 minus 2 would end up being 34. And this would be your expression. So you'll go in and you won't have any kind of equal sign. They're just going to put you a box and you type the number in for your answers. Now this section here in the middle, this actually comes out of section 1.4, and we're going to come back and teach that later, but I just kind of felt like we need it right now just to remember some things about working with exponents. So when you have an exponent, it's really just a shortcut for repeated multiplication for the same number being used over and over again. You guys are sharp and most of you understand this, but I just want to go back over it real quick. So if I'm multiplying 4 times 4 times 4, I have 3 copies of a 4, so I'm just going to call it 4 to the 3rd power. That 3 is this example. The 3 is the exponent. Okay, it tells me what to do with the 4. It stands for how many times that 4 is going to get multiplied as a factor. So that just says really you're writing down 4 times 4 times 4. The thing that's going to be multiplied, the 4 here, is called the base. So our base number is the one that's repeatedly multiplied, and the exponent tells you how many times to multiply it. Now, when we deal with numbers, we don't just leave the answer in power form very often. It would make more sense to go ahead and multiply it out. So 3 times 3 times 3 would come out to be 27. But with variables, you need the exponents, because you don't want to write x to the 6th as x, 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 x. That's too redundant to do it that way. It's a waste of time. But there are some situations that are special that you have to recognize. When you see an expression that has a coefficient and it's next to a variable expression, that exponent is only going to affect the x. The one that's immediately to the left of the power is the only thing that's affected. So in this case, interpreted, this means 2 and then 4 x's. So only the x's are affected by the power. But if you put them both in parentheses and put an exponent on it, that means that's 3 y's written down. Then we can expand it and you'll see that's 3 times 3 times 3, which we got was 27 already. And now I have a y and a y and a y from each one of these, and it gives me y cubed. So in this case, because it's in parentheses, both the number and the variable get the power on it. Now, be careful when you work with negatives and exponents, because you have to understand what your meaning is when you do it. The expression with the negative sign and a y to the 4th and no parentheses is very different from the expression negative with a y raised to a 4th power. The first one technically means the opposite of y to the 4th, which would mean you have a -1 for the negative sign and then 4 y's. So that just makes it be negative y to the 4th. The second one means that you're going to multiply a negative along with every y, and 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives, so that's positive and that's positive. So your answer comes out to be a positive number. So basically, here's the thing you need to remember. If you have a variable raised to an even power, okay, doesn't matter what the variable is, a variable raised to an even power is always going to be a positive number. So make sure that when you type something in your calculator, if you're going to type in -5 and you're going to square it, and you don't put parentheses around it when you type it in, it's going to tell you the answer is negative. But that's because it's doing what you told it to do. It's doing this situation here. So be really careful, but always realize this rule overrides everything your calculator might show you. If you have a variable and you're raising it to an even power, then it's going to be a positive answer. So be careful about how you write it. All right, so quickly let's go through these examples here. So I have 3 and -2 squared minus -2 plus 7. Now here you need to do your powers first. So a -2 squared. So my variable is raised to an even power. So what kind of answer is it? It's positive. So 2 squared would be 4, and 3 times 4 would be 12. Now I have negative and negative, so the opposite of -2 is going to be +2, and then a +7. So I have 14 plus 7, you're going to get 21, and that's what you put in your box on your answer. On your next one, wherever the x is, I'm going to plug in -3. So here I'm going to have 5 minus -3, and then a double parentheses, and then a squared on the outside. So I put parentheses around the negative sign, the -3, because I'm plugging it in there. Okay, then plus 3, -3, and 4. So simplify this inside here first, and then you're going to raise it to a power. So minus a minus is going to make that be plus. So 5 plus 3, 8, is going to get squared. So that'll be 64. And over here I've got 3 times 4. I'll do that one first, just the two positives, because that's quick. That'd be 12 times a -3, so that's going to be a -36. And so I get 64 minus 36 comes out to be 28. Alright, now Now these two examples are just like what I showed you up here. You're going to plug in a -3 where I see x. So I'm going to have a -2, whoops, times a -3, and then I'm going to square that. So the 2 times the -3 is inside the parentheses. So -2 times -3 is going to be +6, and I square it, so my answer comes out to be 36. Now over here, I'm going to have a -2, then I'm going to have -3, but the -3 is what gets squared. So the -3 squared is going to give me a +9 times -2, and that's -18. So evaluate problems. These are pretty simple. You can make sign mistakes, so be very careful with them, and you can make mistakes just typing the answer in. Now, if you make a mistake when you type your answer in and you check it, and it'll kind of tell you a little summary of what you missed wrong. If you check it, go back and look at your answer and see maybe it should have been a negative and you wrote it positive. So just go back and then change the answer, and you don't have to redo the whole problem. Okay, evaluating formulas. There's a couple of problems on the homework that ask you just to find what the answer would be for a particular formula. There's a lot of different things, and in your homework assignments there's some that convert Fahrenheit temperature to Celsius. We have a lot of formulas for geometry things, for area, for perimeter, for volume. Sometimes a formula for finding interest on the deposits of your money. There's a whole bunch of formulas listed in the textbook on page 44 through 46, and I wasn't going to worry about listing a bunch of formulas for you. Now, the answers for these kind of questions are all going to be labeled in some units of measurement. So I believe that on a lot of your homework, it's got your box for your answer, and then beside it, it'll have like meters squared or inches. So just be sure and look at it and see. So here it wants you to find the area of a triangle. There are two options for the formula, so you can use either one. Probably the second one is the one that's going to look the best. So it says where B is, you're going to put 13.4. Where H is, you're going to put 4.6. So we're going to write H, B, and H. It doesn't matter what order. 13.4 and 4.6. And then we're going to divide that answer by 2, and that will give us the area of that triangle. So for the fact that I don't have a calculator sitting here next to me, 13.4, 4.6, 4, 9, 7, and 16, 13, 5. Okay, so I have 4, I have 5, 2, and 5. Check me. 52.54. And then I'm going to divide that by 2. So divide by 2. So my area comes out to be 2, that's 4, 6, 2.27. Should be 26.27 meters squared. Check me on that one because I don't have a calculator. Okay? Alright, on the next problems, again, they're going to use formulas and they kind of tell you what to do with them. So here is a formula that a Fahrenheit temperature if you're given a Celsius temperature using the formula. So if we know the Celsius temperature, Celsius stands for the C. So what we're going to do is plug 20 in where we see the C right here. So I'll have F equals 9/5 times 20 plus 32. Now since I'm multiplying a fraction times a whole number, I'm going to put it over that, over 1, and then just work it out. Well, I can reduce a 5, I know will go into a 20, so I can simplify this first before I even multiply. So I can divide out a 5 from each one. That leaves me with 4. So now I can do it in my head. That'll be F equals 36 plus 32. So 36 plus 32 would be 68. and temperatures measured in degrees. So I'll put a degree sign on it. Okay, now when you multiply fractions, if you see that something can reduce ahead of time, then you can go ahead and do that reducing first, and then the multiplication is pretty quick and easy. Now the second one asks you to do perimeter, and it gives you a formula for perimeter. Perimeter is the distance measured around something. So like if you were going to fence a pasture, or maybe you were going to put crown molding around the edge of your ceiling in a room, or maybe you had to put molding around the edge of a door casing. So that would be when you would be finding perimeter. So here it asks for you to find the perimeter, and they're going to give us a length and they're going to give us a width. So you just plug the numbers in. The length is 35 feet plus 2 times 23.5. So I'm going to just multiply and add. Use your calculators. So that'd be 70 plus 23.5. That'll be 47. Add them together, 117. And this time our measurements are in plane units because we're not squaring. So your answer would be 117 feet. Now sometimes you have to be careful because they might ask you to find it in a different unit. So what if they ask you to find it in yards? Well, how many feet are in a yard? So what that means is we're going from a smaller unit to a bigger unit. So we have to divide the feet. So to get yards, we would take 117 and divide it by 3. And that would give us the measure unit. Our unit answer would then be in yards. If we wanted our answer in inches, that means we're going to get a whole bunch more inches out of the feet, and we would take the 117 and multiply it times 12 inches in a foot. So you're going to be sometimes converting between units. So you got to make sure that you look and you see what it asks, how it asks for you to write the answer. Does it want it in inches? Does it want it in yards? Want it in feet? Y'all are going to find more of this in P-TECH than you realize. Now the last one here is kind of fun. It's a period of time. It's not one that you're probably familiar with, but the period of time it takes for a clock pendulum to swing back and forth one time is measured by this formula that's given. 2 pi and the square root of the length over a g value. That g stands for a gravity number, because think about it, when a pendulum is swinging, there's gravity that's pulling down on that pendulum that affects the speed that it goes and how long it goes. So find the period of time. So we're going to be finding units in seconds. We're going to plug in L with a 288. We're going to use the pi key on your calculator. So you'll have to find that pi key where it is on your calculator, because otherwise if you only use your designated 3.14, because I'm just randomly going to choose that on your own, you might not get the right answer. So you have to follow the instructions. Sometimes it'll say use 3.14 for pi. In that case, do it. Otherwise, use your pi key. The units for this answer will be seconds. So we're going to have t equals 2. Then you're going to pull in that pi key off your calculator, and then you're going to hit square root on your calculator, and then you're going to put 288, and then you're going to put divided by, g is an assigned number, 32 feet per second squared. So those numbers are going to be what you can just type in your calculator. Type them all in and it'll get a time, and the time comes out to be about 18 seconds. Now think about this. If it takes 18 seconds for a pendulum on a clock to swing from here all the way back to here, if it takes 18 seconds for that to happen, what does that tell you about that pendulum? It's got to be pretty long, and it says it's 288 feet long. So that is a huge clock or a huge pendulum on whatever it is that's swinging. Now it doesn't mean that this has to only apply to clocks, because if you think about how things are used, say you had a crane that had a wrecking ball on it, that wrecking ball might be swinging back and forth too. So there's other things that can be measured in this formula that are affected by that same piece of information. So there's a couple of formula problems you'll have to do on this homework. I don't know that there's a clock one, but I do know that there's a Fahrenheit one. So there's a few, this homework is like 1.5, it's pretty easy. So I think you'll do a pretty good job with it. And when you finish it, just click it, check it, and you're done with it. Talk to you later.